Welcome, Negronis with Nord, episode number 89. Today we have Tyra Booker joining us. She is the director of social media at Ilia. She has been putting content on the internet since she was 13. We talk about her journey from being a YouTuber to turning down life as a full-time influencer to get her journalism degree to now straddling between the worlds of a creator and running a brand's social and influencer strategy. She is also going to tell us all about how she ended up in a Charli XCX video. We have an incredible conversation here that is uniquely beneficial for both brands and influencers. As always, like, subscribe, send me a compliment, leave us a review, send in questions, guests you want to see. But without further ado, let's jump into the episode. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for coming. Okay.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Well, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I think the question everybody has, and what I feel like is a natural place to start, is how the hell did you end up in a Charli XCX video?
Is that where we're starting?
We're just going to jump into it.
I'm bicoastal. I live between New York and LA. I got my start as an influencer on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the friends that I have now are in entertainment and are in YouTube. So one of the people I'm friends with is Addison Rae.
Mm-hmm.
We were in LA and we were having dinner and she was like, I'm going to do a surprise set for Charli at her boiler room in New York. Do you guys want to fly to New York tomorrow?
Yeah.
And we did. And we went to her boiler room. It was the most fun thing ever. That's where I met Charli first. And she's the sweetest person. I've met a lot of people in this industry. And I would say, like, she's just so down to earth. We had been going out a few times together, and her creative director DM'd me and asked me if I wanted to be a part of the music video.
So fun.
And so I submitted some casting photos, and then I got casted, and it was a blast.
We love it.
Yeah.
I feel like it's such a fun. I was sitting doing alternate side parking this morning, sitting in my car waiting for the street sweeper to go by. Same as hanging out with Charli. And I was like weirdly watching Chapel's Tiny Desk concert, and I was like, this is like such a fun moment. I feel like there's like so many people having a moment this summer that have deserved it and who have worked for so long, and Charli's like spent well over a decade not in obscurity, but like it's so fun to see this happen, and
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for her, and I'm so excited for just like women generally in pop music right now.
Culture, everything.
It's amazing, especially Charli. Like, she is someone who like I have been a fan of for a very long time. I feel like she's someone who like has stuck to her sound for a very long time and has not wavered.
Yeah.
And just now, like, pop culture is awakening to it, which
Yeah.
is really hard to do as a person in music, but especially a female in music.
Absolutely.
Especially if you're not young, super young.
Yeah.
So I think it's just like pretty incredible to watch
really fun.
like her movement kind of impact the music industry, but also the political industry and just like culture generally.
Yeah.
And so she says this herself, like there couldn't have been a better time for like this to happen.
Yeah. And like big summer for gay culture feeling vindicated.
Yes.
And being like, I was right.
Yes. Yeah, they always are.
They always are. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. What you do so much, as you just said, you are running social at a huge brand that's growing really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You influencer, model, you've done all of these things, right? What do you like? Do you have a sense of what you want to be known for? Like, how do you present? Are you like want to be a multi-hyphenate? Are you like going more all in on the brand stuff? Like, what do you want to be known for now? And maybe like, is that different than in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of why I even entered the beauty industry or the social space is because when I was young, I didn't see very many images of people who looked like me, like in magazines or online or on television. And I think about beauty specifically and like why that's so important, because I was identifying who I was as a woman, but also as a Black woman, and there were no brands that really spoke to me. So I created a YouTube channel because I wanted to be that for other people, and it grew. I mean, I paid for my first year of college with it. It was amazing, and I ended up getting hired to work for Maybelline to create their YouTube channel. And then they hired me my junior year summer of college to be full-time.
Amazing.
So I do feel like a part of it is like, there are certain paths that you look for, but there's certain paths that come to you really easily and naturally. And this has just been one of those things. So I think for me, like, I don't feel like I could totally go all in on being like, you know, an influencer and a model myself, because I enjoy impacting the way that people perceive themselves. And I think that brands have a lot of power to do that. So if I could walk away with just like having someone see themselves in some of the things that I create, whether it's like I'm a print model in an ad, or whether it's like I'm a brand that's introducing a new product that you can use that someone else couldn't use previously, like that is all that I care about.
Yeah.
And hopefully one day I'll be able to like make a brand of my own where I'm doing that for other people.
When did you start your YouTube?
When I was 13.
So, okay.
Really young.
Yeah. So was that a conscious decision? Okay, so like it's paying for your first year of college. You've got the Maybelline thing happening your junior. Like there's these things happening. Where do you feel like you made a conscious choice to say, you know, I've got one path where I leave school, I do this full time. This is a lucrative path. Like you were early, you were right that like this was going to be a thing. Or you keep doing it and you do the brand thing. Like, do you feel like you made a super conscious choice, or you just had opportunities presented to you and kind of felt like, yeah, let's try to work like on the
I
brand
would
side?
say that my parents made the conscious choice. If I'm being honest, I will also set the context too. Like when I was starting YouTube, the biggest YouTuber at the time was Michelle Phan, who, you know, was just given her own brand. She was working with Fohr at the time. She kind of like, and I would argue that that was kind of like the birth of like the creator industry at the time. So there weren't really a lot of spaces for creators to go unless you were that size.
Yeah.
So a lot of the creators at the
like
time,
2015, 14, 15?
2013, like 2013, even like
Yeah.
younger. But there weren't a lot of spaces for people to go at the time. I ended up getting signed to an influencer agency when I was in high school, and I was making a good bit of money. And I got offered to move to LA full time with 17 magazine actually to create a show.
Amazing.
It was me and a lot of my friends that like honestly Fohr might sometimes work with.
Yeah.
And my parents were like, at the end of the day, like this industry will always be here. We really think it's important for you to get your education. Why don't you explore something in journalism? So I ended up going to Newhouse at Syracuse University that like is one of the best journalism schools. They have a lot of amazing resources to help explore. I thought I wanted to be like a broadcast journalist. I was like, I'm on television on YouTube, so could I be on television full time? And then I realized in learning in that practice that like a lot of people don't watch the news anymore. They like short form content. So I just decided to do PR and marketing with like a focus in fashion and beauty, and then decide that I would go wherever. But I generally think it was a conscious decision for me as well to understand when you are a person that's working for yourself, your entire day is about yourself. But what I really enjoyed was creating impact for others. So a lot of my friends who are influencers struggle with this, where they're like, what is my purpose outside of what I do on a day-to-day basis? And if what I do on a day-to-day basis becomes my full-time job, what am I doing?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And like, it's something we've actually talked about on this show. It's such a unique job being an influencer, because there probably is no more like self-focused job that you can have. Because even when you're an actor, like when you go onto set, you are working towards the bigger purpose. Now, all of a sudden, no matter how big of a star you are, the movie is more important than you. And you're working on a product that isn't just you. If you are a model and you're in a shoot, you are, it's not actually about you. It's about this character you're portraying, this brand that you're representing. And it is such a me focused thing. And I think it's hard when you don't have the bigger kind of purpose to connect you to, other than like, being like, and I want to be famous and rich, which can be
100%. I think and that's why you kind of see the trend of like Rihanna and Selena like creating beauty brands, or like people were friends of mine like Emma Chamberlain, or like Addison, who's like gone into like the acting and the music industry, or Addison becoming like a fashion darling, but then having like her coffee company. You have to have some sort of a focus that you're building beyond yourself in order to create purpose.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can't have purpose if you are the purpose.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know?
I mean, I think some people probably can,
Yeah.
right? Which is like fine.
Yeah.
But it's like it takes a certain
Yeah.
type. Do you ever look back on that that decision? You moved to LA, you could move to LA, you do the thing with 17, you try and go all in. A lot of your friends, I'm sure, have become fabulously successful in their own right. I'm sure some have fanned out and it hasn't worked out for them. But like, is there any regret there? Do you feel like you're glad your parents pushed you into that and you went to school and did that and have gone down this path?
I think what's amazing is that we've ended up in the same exact space.
Yeah.
I went to college and that was like 4 years of my life. And then I came back to New York and I was working for L'Oreal. And it wasn't until 2 years ago that I moved back to LA, and I'm friends with all of the same people that I had back then. And we all, have these really amazing collaborative conversations where a lot of them are building their own brands, whether it's like, Frankie's Bikinis or Mad Happy or Wildflower Cases. Like they're kind of turning into these like business giants. And, whether it's asking like my creative opinion on like how to build out strategy or how we can be collaborative, or let's say like you're going to plot me into a music video to be supportive. Like it's created this really beautiful, creative, collaborative energy that I think, you are where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And, even though I took that route, I'm still winding up in the same space, having the same exact opportunity. I think my parents were right. If it's meant to be, like it will come back to you. And that's exactly what's happened.
Yeah. You've been putting shit on the internet for over 10 years now. What's different about it than doing it for yourself?
For me, I just love the like playground to dream, right? Like it's like, I can build a pop-up space. I can help, support, let's work with this like crazy creator that just started this demurrage trend and like figure out how to insert our product into it. Or, it feels like such a playground of ideas that you don't necessarily get to do for yourself because like, a brand is providing the resources to do that. It's also an amazing learning opportunity, right? Like retail expansion, going global, learning from, these incredible leaders like Sasha, the founder. She's a very creative minded. So I've learned a lot about like production and creative direction and things of that nature. I think if you're just someone who wants to learn, like working for brands is like a really great place to start to do that with like incredible amount of resources.
Yeah. Yeah. I think something that's like interesting when you are in a brand more and you are responsible for the stuff working is you realize how much more important execution is than the idea, right?
Yes.
Because look, we've seen if it was just the idea and having some audience, then every influencer brand would work, but most of them fail like spectacularly because the execution thing is the hard part, and there's certainly some chance there. But I do think as a creative person, it can help you like understand that you do actually have to know how to make it work. You can't just like have an audience, have an idea, and like be like, I will just find people that can make this happen. I think like it behooves you to get in there and understand it. I was reading your interview on Link in Bio, and you were talking about a launch you had just done. You guys had done the Tezza thing. You had like, done this big influencer push. You had a bunch of cool kind of creative stuff with the VHS and all this stuff. What struck me is you led with like, we had 55,000 people sign up for the like pre-sale for the product. And it reminded me of something we talk about in that a lot of newer, younger marketers coming up really love social and they understand social, but they maybe don't understand marketing. And I thought was interesting was like, you had a real, like, I felt like full funnel 360 degree view in how this campaign like rolls out. How much of, I want to talk a little bit about that of because people watching this, either are creators or they're marketers or they want to be one of the two, but the difference between like being good at social and understanding marketing and how you've kind of like learned how to play in those spaces as someone who like endemically social is like natural to you, but like having to understand again as we think about a brand and supporting these big brands that have real sales goals, and it's not just like, can I make something go viral, right? You have to like sell stuff. So that's a really long, convoluted question to talk about, like, how do you think about driving performance in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think something that is unique to Ilia is we don't actually approach social campaigns with virality. We think about like a creative concept, and then we think about how it can extend between like the different channels of how you're communicating it. And then, that creative concept in most cases comes from something that is birthed out of social. And that's just because I'm chronically online. So I am constantly thinking about like, what are people resonating with, and how can we make that feel elevated and cool and creative and approachable as a brand. But we kind of take that approach, and then we see how it extends beyond these multiple levers. And then, means for success. Yes, we're looking at like engagement metrics and impressions, and we're looking at sales goals. But what's been amazing to watch is like, those things come the better the concept is. If we do something that, might be something that's existing in other spaces, it's not as successful. I also think too, like when you have retailers like Sephora letting us know that a lot of the ways that people are coming in stores are being driven by channels like TikTok and social, like, because Ilia is still kind of like, I mean, we're owned by Clarins, but we still operate like an independent brand. We have the ability to put a lot more resources in those spaces. Whereas like I've worked for heritage brands like at L'Oreal, where you might have a lot of stake in things like department stores or out of home, or, the airport, all of those things. So you can't necessarily place all of your bets in one area, but we have the opportunity to take those risks.
Yeah. How much, on the concept side of things, because again, I felt like that whole campaign was really well thought out. It had, it was on social, it was off it. You had the Teza thing, like you had the VHS tapes and all of those activations. Like I thought that was all great. But how much of the work that y'all are doing is that like big campaign versus like the stuff that you just have to support day to day? And is it super intentional as far as like, we want 4 of these big concepts a year, and then we're going to have the kind of always on, like, how do you kind of plan out your year?
Yeah, I guess we kind of look at the calendar, and then we just decide where we want to place our big bets. And then for, the creative concepting, that's something that happens for every launch that we have, just because Sasha, I remember when she hired me, she was like, I just want to let you know, we're not a marketing company, we're a creative one. So like everything that we do is like based off of creative ideation. So we spend a large chunk of our time talking about creative. And like, even when I think about like that launch that you're referring to, where it's like the tagline was for a Skin Rewind complexion stick, and it was called Enter Your Best Skin Era. That was because I let her know that on social, everyone's like, I'm in my brat era. I'm in my Taylor era.
Right.
And this is the best way to speak to, the Skin Rewind element of the fact that you can be at your best era at any time in your life.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we used as the basis to go on, building the VHS world or working with Teza, that allowed us to extend all of those legs.
Do you think there's something creators can take away from that? Should they be thinking about bigger creative like blocks and then creating content around that, or do you think it's something that's specifically more brand, like makes more sense for brands?
I think it's really interesting because while I kind of feel like that question's twofold. Like, one, I think creators who are able to operate in their own niches are really strong players, right? Like someone who's just like a knitter and is like constantly focusing on knitting. It's like brands nowadays, when they're reaching out to creators, they're like, I need someone who's a creative person that is a designer. You go to the knitter. So like the nicheness helps. Also, like being micro, like in the nicheness pairs really nicely. But something that I have seen some of my creator friends struggle with is if they've had a particular niche that's worked really well, but that niche is no longer relevant within culture. How do I kind of like ebb and flow to approach like where the consumers are and meet them where they are? So I think that always helps to obviously be aware of like the cultural conversation of what's going on and tap into that. I think like fashion creators are really great at that, where like they can kind of like, this is my approach to, brat within, my own lens. So I think as long as they're like kind of strong with their identity as a creator and then approach the trends as they come, that feels fair. But to make like your entire, creator profile based off of a trend feels ephemeral, because at the end of the day, they always change.
Right.
And I think you end up getting someone who is like, they're interested in the trend, and maybe you did a great job jumping on that, but like it's probably not going to convert to a following. If it does, to your point, like a month later when everyone's moved on, and you're stuck like just doing the same thing and it's not resonating. Like you're
exactly. That's where I think perspective really matters. Like, this might be controversial, but like Jeffree Star, I mean, the way that he has been able to revive his career, I mean, not that it's ever really gone anywhere, but like this is a creator that, like, if we're talking about Michelle Phan, was as big like in 2013. And he kind of took a step back to build his own beauty brand. And he's come on TikTok, and he hasn't come on TikTok doing, a transition or a song. He's come on TikTok to give his perspective on kind of the new makeup that's out in the space. And it's working because his perspective has never wavered,
I think also Brian Boy has done a good job. Like another OG who like, was so big as a blogger, and then like did really well on Instagram, and then I think wasn't finding his like footing in TikTok, and has just like leaned into this like just to himself, and he's doing great now, which I wouldn't have guessed. I think it is hard because a lot of the people, Michelle Phan, that graduating class of that time, a lot of people that have just kind of like disappeared, and fallen out of relevance. And there's only a few who've been able to like jump. It's one thing to be able to jump from like one trend to another, but being able to jump like multiple platforms is really hard.
It's a talent.
You came up on YouTube, and that is something I feel like has, when we started this company, YouTube was huge. I mean, it's still obviously huge from a consumption standpoint, but like we really don't do much. Not much money goes to YouTube anymore. So it's been interesting to watch like creators try and jump platforms, which is tough.
Yeah, it's interesting because I also think in this like new age of social, a lot of creators might feel that they have to be one size fits all on a lot of platforms, but because we have so many more platforms, you really can lean into what you're good at. Like TikTok is a really amazing place for discovery, but YouTube is a really amazing place for education. But like Instagram might necessarily be where you're making your purchase intent on it. Like it still is, like Instagram and Facebook still are the biggest platform for purchase intent. So I think you can kind of, now there's Substack. It's like if you're a writer, but you don't necessarily want to be on screen, it's like you can lean into those things. There's a lot of flexibility now that like in my era of influencing didn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you came from this time where if you did get a following, you could build a long career. I feel like something I worry about with TikTok, with how, ephemeral it all is, that people are getting these big followings, they're getting the attention, and then, it's falling away just as quickly. And it's a really difficult platform to build a sustainable career on, because you're not, people are following an algorithm, not people. They're not opening the app to say, I wonder where my friend is today. I wonder what this person is doing. I want to see the next post about this house they're redoing necessarily. Is it putting us back into a place that's kind of like, you need to get huge? It's almost like it was 10 years ago where like, to have a sustainable career in TikTok, you have to get like over 1 million huge. Whereas like, there are creators who have 120,000 followers on Instagram who have been making 6 figures for 10 years and probably can continue to for another 10 years. Like, it just feels like there's more longevity there. Do you agree? Do you think it's do you think you can build a long career on TikTok and not be a huge creator?
Yeah, I think I love TikTok. I think it's created like the democratization of like the creator industry. So like now anyone can be a creator. I think it kind of goes back to my point where it's like, what is your niche? What is your perspective? And that's the longevity you're providing. I feel like some certain TikTokers are really smart in that they are like, okay, well, if you want to see these outfit deets, go to my Instagram stories. If you want to see this full day, go to YouTube. Or they're providing other spaces to exist so that they're building a brand that's beyond just their TikTok channel. But I mean, the checks that I see these TikTokers getting cut today are nowhere near what YouTubers are getting paid back in the day. It's probably like the most expensive platform that I think that they can make a career and a living based off of that platform, just based off of the rates alone, you know? And also just like the frequency at which we're like being given a big creator a week, honestly. That's like, there's the Mirror Girl might be like really amazing this week, but you know, all the Love Island cast was like, you know, the week before. It feels very like transitional. So I kind of feel like it's given a lot more people opportunities versus in the past where there might have been like few and far between, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. As we think about influencer in your job, how does influencer play into, let's start with just again, as we plan content for y'all's feed, it looks like, you know, generally, I feel like maybe 15-20% of the content feels like it's a influencer speaking to camera, doing a tutorial or something, walking through a product. Like, do you all have set, like, this is how much we want to do? This is kind of, how much influencer we want on the feed?
We typically like post a face like every other post. I feel like diversity is really important to Ilia. So like showcasing the product on different skin tones really matters. I think in how we show the creator has honestly changed. Like I think back in the day, you probably would get like a lot of get ready with me's with creators just like applying makeup silently. And now what's way more important is like personality. Carousels are back, still images are back, flat lays with product and kind of showing what your full day looks like with product is back. Like it feels like people are kind of interested in consuming media differently than they were in the past. So I think how we use the creator has changed. But I think for every launch, we want to make sure that we have, you know, a good amount of faces to be able to show the diversity of the product.
And how much of that is, you know, a customer UGC that you see and you say, I love this, I want to like reach out and maybe license it or something, versus like, no, we know we're going to go out, we're going to like do sponsored content with this set of people, we're going to take the best videos, we're going to use those for our owned and paid. Like, are you, is there a balance between UGC, or is it all like this is contracted?
We honestly have a few different avenues for how we get content. I think we probably start from a place of UGC. Like we look at creators that are already organically speaking to us, and if they are, then we'll definitely contract them. We also have like a creator community that we like gift on a monthly basis. So if some of those partners end up being people that we think will perform really well, we'll contract them. And then for certain launches, we hit target audiences that we want to speak to, you know, like, is it a skincare enthusiast, or is it, you know, a beauty connoisseur? Is it someone who's like in the creative industry? Like, are they in architecture or fashion? So every launch kind of has a different audience, and then that's how we'll kind of look at the paid partner piece. But I would really say it's probably like 40-60, but it starts organically and then we build from there.
Yeah. As marketers, we're always like, we kind of fall back on these ways of being able to categorize, you know, launches, people, whatever it might be. And I feel like you're talking in like archetypes almost. And I think it's like an interesting thing, like that influencers probably don't understand about how this shit actually gets done.
Yes.
Is that like every campaign, you know, as like eye-rolly as it can be, like ultimately the archetypes do help. They help for people outside of social to understand who we're going after. Is this the such and such striver, or the like, you know, the corporate whatever, you know? And I think it's like influencers, like if they understood that, I feel like would you know, you need to explicitly like be something, right?
Yes.
Like, because we do have to create these buckets and say like, okay, which one of these are you?
Yeah.
And you probably can't reverse engineer it, but I do think as an influencer, it is probably important to be like, you have a real point of view.
It's my number one piece of advice I give to all of my influencer friends. I'm just like, they're like, oh, I'm not seeing any brand deals come in. I'm like, let's look at your feed and let's understand what your perspective is. You know, are you someone who's like interested in nature? Are you someone that's interested in fashion? Like, let's showcase those interests. But you're so right. I think to them, they're just kind of like throwing up a post and letting it breathe. And I think for some people that does work, because if they have a really defined perspective, then that works. But
Right.
I think for a lot of people, especially in like the mid-tier size, I think that's kind of where they get lost.
Yeah.
Because they're big enough to not be a micro, but
Yeah.
they're not large enough to be a macro to make those macro checks. So like, how do you kind of define a little bit more perspective, I think is like where they're feeling squeezed.
It speaks to your like niche,
Yeah.
like niching down a little bit as
Yeah,
well.
exactly.
Is that like, you know, it's amazing. I think when you're doing this as your job, how quickly you can also look at someone's feed and be like, yes, no.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, I think as a creator, you'd like to think that people are spending minutes
Yeah.
and like they're often not. It could be
Yeah.
like probably less than a minute. You like look at the feed, click like 2 or 3 posts, and you know, like you may not make a decision then like I'm gonna pay this person. I know I want to work with them, but like you know, am I like interested or not interested? And I think
Yeah.
like it does behoove creators to like be super explicit about like that's your homepage. That's your like resume.
Yeah.
What are you saying to the world? And if I can't understand it by opening 2 or 3 posts and just by like quick scan through your feed, then like how are they going to know if you fit into like what they're doing, right?
Yeah, and I think that's okay. Like, I think creators should give themselves a bit more grace. Like, you don't have to be good at everything all of the time. Like, I've had brands reach out to me before asking me to do like recipe videos with a drink, and they'd pay me a certain amount of money. But if my content organically is posting kind of like fashion or a night out or, you know, maybe like a look or going to dinner, then it's like, and that's not authentic to me, that's okay. But I do feel like when you're a creator, you feel obligated to try and fit all of these boxes. And I think that's sometimes where you get lost. Whereas like I might have said no to that deal, but then another deal would approach me that fit me even better, that is making me ultimately a stronger creator. I think that's a risk that a lot of creators aren't willing to take because a lot of them are doing this for their livelihood, you know?
Which, to your point, yeah, like raises the stakes, right? Like of your ability to take risks and all of that. You know, outside of the obvious of having a clear point of view and having a great connection with your community and all of that, like, is there anything on the brand side that you feel like you wish influencers understood more? Any ways that they can, you know, project like themselves more effectively so that brands will be more interested in working with them? It's gotten so competitive, I feel like. And again, it's hard to peel back the curtain. And I think a lot of the advice I see on TikTok targeted towards creators is not rooted in a lot of like reality. It's of like or deep understanding sometimes of the space. So I don't know if they're always getting good advice. So what can they do to increase their chances, you think, of even working with y'all?
For me, it really is, are you organically speaking about the product? We've had a lot of people approach us, no matter how big, right? They could be a celebrity where they want to work with the brand. And we notice that they're not organically speaking about the brand. And so the first thing for us is to like, how can we create a relationship that feels authentic? So I think that's like number one. Number two would definitely be like taking a look at the content of the brand and taking a look at your content. Is the content like-minded? You know, I think certainly there's like a degree of expression that every creator should be allowed to have, but you know, Ilia is not Milk Makeup, so we might not necessarily have the same leeway to be as like edgy and editorial as like other brands, and that's okay. I think like some brands also like to be everything to all people, and I think what works is when you define a perspective, because that's ultimately like the community that people are joining. So I think understanding that, and then the last thing I think we've talked about ad nauseum was definitely like, what is your perspective that you're offering for the brand? You know, like at this point, everyone is a content creator. Everyone can make Get Ready With Me content. Everyone can apply Make It Silently. What else are you offering as a creator that would be added value to the brand? I think is really important to think about, because if it's added value that you think the brand is missing, then that is like really the perfect starting place to have a long-term relationship with the brand, because that's something that no one else is offering.
Right. Yeah, I love it. What about brand content? 2013, brands had the biggest following in the world, because like people joined these platforms and they were like, well, I like Armani Beauty, so I guess I'll follow them. Increasingly, brand content is getting harder. It's like not performing as well. People aren't as interested in hearing from brands. You know, straddling both sides of this world a bit, what do you think the future of social is for brands? How are you helping Ilia prepare for that future?
You know, what's really interesting is that when I first joined Ilia, I kind of had like similar rhetoric where I was like, you know, how like people don't really follow brands anymore, you know, and like at the time we were at like 400,000 followers and we just hit 1 million, like I think a month ago, which is so exciting.
Yeah.
And something that's been really amazing for me to also watch is see these other brands enter the space that have done similar. Like Rhode has just recently hit, I think, like 1.5 million, almost 2 million. Summer Fridays just hit 1 million. And when I think about like, whereas there are certain brands that I've worked for in the past that have not hit that threshold. So I'm aware that it's like a unique position to be in, but I do feel like there's honestly like a resurgence of energy for brands specifically. And when I think about brands like Ilia and Rhode and Glossier and Summer Fridays, the one thing that I think that they have in common is that these brands represent not only brands, but people. Like they have really defined like personality type, where it's like, you know, to me, Glossier might be a little bit younger version of an Ilia, where it's like you're playing with makeup, you're experimenting, and they have this like very playful nature to their feed. Whereas like a Summer Fridays, I can say that she is like a coastal girl, or, you know, he, she, they, them, and like she is kind of like at the beach and relaxing, whereas like a Rhode, you know, I can say that's a very defined personality. Whereas I think before, brands were kind of operating like a Giorgio Armani. Like I can't actually tell you what the personality traits of someone who follows Giorgio Armani have. So to me, it feels like, and when you look at the engagement of these brands, like something like a Rhode or a Glossier, for example, they have 30,000 people liking one post. That's even more than a creator.
Right.
So to me, and when you're looking at the content, it's like you're posting as if you were a person on Instagram. A carousel, it's now a carousel dump versus like of iPhone images versus like highly produced images that you're posting once on a feed that are much like a lot of the heritage brands. So to me, the future of brands is actually the personification of them. And I think that will lend itself to not only a brand, but a community that people want to follow and be a part of. Much very similar to like Charli XCX and Brat. It's like people are actually subscribing to Brat more than they're subscribing to Charli XCX, because that is like the world that she's built. So I think if you're a brand, like starting there actually feels like the most important place for you to be.
Isn't that part of what got brands in trouble in like 2020? Was they spent a decade being like, we're your friend, we share the same values as you, all this. And then, you know, when customers asked, oh, okay, so you share my values, so like, how do you feel about this? Or like, why are those values not reflected in the way that you're running your company? Then there was all this backlash. It feels a bit like what you're saying is maybe the shift is that brands are kind of going from values to maybe like vibe based more. And like, I understand who this person is. You know, we're not going to talk as much about their political beliefs or these other things.
I think that depends on who you are as a brand. you know, similarly to like how it depends on who you are as a person, right? It's like I don't think the requirement should be for like every celebrity to have a perspective on like a political point of view if they haven't had that lived experience. So I think there are certain brands that like do that really well. For instance, like Ami Cole is like a Black founder-led brand who is speaking to that audience in such a beautiful way. I don't know that I would require a brand that hasn't had that same level of experience to speak to that audience. I do think like the shift for me is like, yes, like, and part of it is like, you know, how do we stop thinking like a brand and start thinking like a person and like what they believe and value? But the other part of me is like product to people. Like when I think about brands like back in like the early 2000s and even when I first started, like a lot of the heritage brands prided themselves off of like Urban Decay Naked Palette, like Giorgio Armani, a luminous silk foundation. And that's how they were growing. But because now we're in a market where things are being launched at really rapid pace, similar to like music, similar to creators. Like you can't have one product sustain who you are as a brand. You have to identify what these legs are outside of that so someone believes in it. You know, because ultimately at the end of the day, when I look at my mom like shopping like Black Radiance, I think that's like a really old like foundation brand that had like one of her skin tones. That's because she ultimately, and she still shops that brand. That's because she believed that brand offered tones for her versus like shopping whatever the best foundation is. So I think it's going to be a challenge for brands because a lot of brands have rested the success of their brand based off of performance of a particular SKU. But even when you look at your cabinet, it's like, when I'm out of something, I'm shopping whatever the new hottest thing is. I'm not returning to that same thing very, very rarely.
And it was like this speaks to your earlier point. I think that brands, the game used to be distribution. And that was where you built a moat, was that like L'Oreal's distribution, like a startup they just couldn't break into that because if everyone is buying their makeup at, you know, these 10 big retailers and L'Oreal owns the counters at those retailers, then like, what the fuck are you going to do? You know, like you can't break in, right? Because you've kind of built this distribution where now distribution is much easier and like tapping into culture is harder. So you see these legacy brands that are huge, $1 billion a year sales brands, and you go to their feed and they got 80,000 followers. And they're still benefiting from the distribution and from that like behavioral loyalty from customers of just like, well, I've always bought this, so I buy it. But I do think that, you know, as the generations shift, we'll see more of that of you know, not having a lot of brand loyalty, which is not dissimilar from what we were saying with the creators. Is like, it's harder. You can't just get a follower and assume 5 years from now that follower is still going to be consuming your content. You have to like be winning them over.
You have to
constantly.
work a lot harder. And ultimately at the end of the day, when you see the successive road, it's like they're not buying it because of the product. They're buying it because they believe that this is like bringing them into a community for Haley, you know? But there are certain mass brands that I think have done really amazing jobs. Like I actually do think that Maybelline has done such a great one. I think like e.l.f. has done a really amazing job. I think NYX has done a really amazing job. So I think there's ways to go about it, but it's just like it's definitely not a form of traditional marketing that I think a lot of people are used to.
You know, if we think about the L'Oreals and these brands that have been dominant for decades and enormous, you know, like, are we ever going to get something that big again, right? Or is the future of brands that like you kind of have this, you know, moment, and maybe that moment's a decade, but ultimately like, you know, Rhode's not going to go and roll up the market and buy 20 beauty brands and build this enormous, you know, $80 billion behemoth. Is as the world niches down, and that's like very much happening in social again. We come from a time where like you knew everyone that had over 1 million followers, and now people send me shit all the time. I'm like, this person has 30 million followers? I've never heard of that. That's crazy. Like, is the future just that like everything is smaller, but that it's more distributed?
I mean, coming from someone who worked at a L'Oreal, their future is their acquisition strategy, right? They have the ability to buy the way that the consumer is shopping. So that's why you're seeing their acquisitions be a lot more different than they have in the past, where there might be acquiring a Youth to the People or an Aesop or a Miu Miu, because that's the direction of where consumers are shopping. So I think we are always going to live in a world of something like that. I think, will we have something as big? It's interesting because Emily Weiss tried that with Glossier, and she ultimately couldn't do it because she needed distribution.
Yeah.
So I look at the monopolies.
And
like
Glossier is amazing, but that's like a $200 million brand a year.
100%.
Like that's a rounding error for these bigger brands. And like,
yeah. And then when you think about like the monopolization of like things like Sephora, it is the one-stop shop that every independent brand has to go to in order to have any sort of distribution in like middle America or metropolitan cities. And then the second one is Ulta. So you're always going to need a distribution player to get that big. And so, you know, a lot of people don't know that when you join those retailers, you have to give a percentage of your business. And so that means that they're maintaining a monopoly.
Yep.
So it would be very, very tough. You would have to be someone that I think came from a substantial amount of money. Like when we're thinking about L'Oreal, like that family, the Betancourt family, is like one of the wealthiest families in the world in order to break that cycle.
Yeah.
But I really admire brands like Ilia who have sold to, you know, Clarins, and we're still able to operate really independently. I think like that's something that you'll see a lot in the future. And then I think you'll see like a lot of private equity investment firms kind of taking stake in beauty brands because they see now the size of the pie.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It'll be really interesting to watch.
I think that like it makes sense. I mean, I think that model works out really nicely. The founder gets to make money, then the bigger conglomerate can like, you know, go try and build this into a multi-decade brand, which is like a hard thing to sustain energy-wise. But it's interesting. I feel like in marketing, you're always like looking at Nike and thinking about it, and like, you know, I just don't think you could ever build something like Nike again that was cross-category dominant across all of these things, because like the niches are so deep now that like to think of a brand that, you know, even in beauty is going to be dominant in, you know, makeup, skincare, fragrance, like all of the things. Like it'd be so hard, right? Because you're competing against someone that's like, all I do is foundation.
Yes.
That's all I do all fucking day. And so that's 5% of your enormous business, but I am going to do that better than you. And now as a customer, I can just walk into Sephora and I can go grab, you know, or Ulta, I can grab the things that I need. And I don't need to just buy Armani Beauty because I go to Neiman Marcus in Dallas and like they have Armani Beauty. And so I like buy my Armani perfume and I buy the foundation and I buy, you know.
It's interesting. I mean, it's definitely something I consider when I think about brands I'm working with. You know, like I've worked with Supergoop in the past, and I truly believed like there's no other player that is competing with them in like the luxury sunscreen space. Yeah. Like I think they have such a strong presence there. And then when I think about Ilia, like I'm like, okay, Ilia, like yes, there are a lot of clean beauty brands, but like with the shade range that Ilia offers, there's like not many other brands that can touch them in that space. And then also has like skincare ingredients included. Like I think there's ways to like, you know, make that and build it. You know, for instance, we launched into skincare with like a face milk and a cleanser, and a lot of makeup brands that do skincare flop. And face milk became one of our biggest SKUs. So there's a desire. Yeah. I think it's all about perspective. I think that's what it comes back to.
How did you talk about skincare on social? Because we often, like when we're talking to clients, we talk about like visible versus invisible benefits. And like the invisible benefits products are really tough to talk about because you can't just show it being used, right? How did you approach talking about that?
To me, I think everyone can be a lot simpler about skincare. I think the average consumer doesn't even know that you should be wearing sunscreen every day. They don't even know the difference between like a chemical and a physical sunscreen. There are a lot of things that are just open-ended questions, something that I like to approach is just even take a look at the way that people are searching about skincare, whether it's like in Google Trends or it's in TikTok or it's in all of these spaces. And that's how I frame the discussion around it. You know, like, what is hyaluronic acid? Can your brand help to educate on the purpose of that? And then this is why you use this product, versus we are a brand that has seaweed extract, vanilla extract, XYZ, and this is why you should buy that product, when the average consumer doesn't understand it. So I think for me, a lot of it is like in paring back on the messaging and having one very simple message and benefit. And then the other piece for me is just like getting that kind of credibility, whether it's like with dermatology experts or in skincare spaces like a spa or, you know, et cetera, to help build the credibility of the brand. But it's definitely like a hard space to be in.
Do you have to push back at all? I mean, it sounds like Ilia is very kind of social first and embracing that, but like, do you have to do any explaining or pushing back internally?
All
of
the
like
time.
Why we can't have 10 key messages in this post?
All the time. Everyone wants 10 key messages. Everyone wants 10 key messages. And you know what I say is I like, think about when you scroll on Instagram, what's the last caption you've read? You know? And then it pairs it back and they're like, I totally understand. You know, I cannot name a single caption I have ever read. We are consuming such a high volume of content. It only depends on like what is actually the physical asset in the post, let alone like the 10 additional messages.
What about, okay, just going tactically, like, what are your feelings on mentioning product in the first few seconds? Important, not important? That's a sticking point at a lot of companies. They want mention the product in the first 3 seconds, which drives influencers crazy.
Personally, like, I don't think it's necessary. I think if you can have like a captivating story, I even think about TikToks, like, I will watch a story time on TikTok that's like, jail, get ready with me. I will be at minute 6 and I'm just so fascinated because it is a story that is captivating. That to me is like the meat of whatever it is that we're creating versus selling someone something, because people are sold things all of the time. So I'm way more interested in the story, you know?
How has that influenced the way you brief the influencers that you work with? Like, how do you make sure you aren't like taking all of the understandable goals and needs of a brand? Like, because you have a new product launch, let's say it's got 4 key features. Like, each of those features does need to be talked about. It's understandable that the brand is going to say, well, it's important that they mention it's from seaweed. Someone has to talk about that, right? Like, so how do you kind of play goalie and like make sure that the creators can do what they do best while also, you know, speaking to what the brand needs to
I think when we're
communicate?
talking about the ad business, I'll segment the needs. So if a product has 4 benefits, each creator is speaking to one versus having one creator speak to all. But if we're talking about like organic and paid partners, I will let them give me the brief and figure out how they can speak to it in an authentic way versus being so particular about all these things that we need. Because at the end of the day, when we get that kind of content back, it feels like we have turned the creator into, you know, like a brand spokesperson instead of letting the creator be themselves. And, you know, ultimately the creator's big because they are themselves.
Yeah. Are you asking for concepts, or are you just kind of saying like, here's the product, here's some of the key messaging, like, go crazy? You
Exactly.
kind of pitch this the way you want.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly that. Unless there's some sort of like, again, like hierarching concept that, you know, feels like it needs to be provided to the creator, where, you know, for Skin Rewind, we were like, you know, because we're talking about the multiple eras of like you using foundation, are you going to feature you and your mom in it to speak about like the multi-generational aspect of these eras? Like, I might give that direction, but I'm not going to tell them what to say.
Yeah.
You know?
For the paid part, like for the partners who you think like, okay, I know I want to put some paid behind this, which is a slightly different kind of content sometimes. Are y'all deciding that beforehand? Do you have a group of people and you say, I'm going to see what content comes out of this that like is doing really well, and then we're going to put paid behind it?
The latter.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's however it performs, because we want it to be organic. I find sometimes when you approach a creator with the payment prior to doing that, their video looks even more like an ad, you know? So we want it to be as organic and as authentic as possible.
Yeah. You've given a bunch of great advice for creators. What is like, you know, yeah, you were saying before, like, this is when my creator friends ask me for advice, this is the first thing I say. Like, what about for your marketer friends? Is there like big pieces of advice that you find yourself giving constantly?
Always take the risk. I think as marketers, we're really scared to take risks nowadays because we're so concerned about like the KPIs and the results. And I think like take the risk and think about the results after. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about Ilia is that I'm always allowed to take the risk. Create space for brainstorming. I think like when you're constantly in a meeting, in a call, you realize you're not even doing the fun part of what it is to be a marketer, which is to dream. So I create like hour blocks on my calendar, like each day where I just like brainstorm and come up with silly ideas and create that space, especially if you're a manager for your direct reports, to teach them to do that.
You do that solo or with someone?
I do it solo and then I do it with my team.
Okay.
And go outside. I think brands and marketers are too focused on looking at what everyone else is doing that it creates this like insane nature of repetition that ultimately I think what the creator desires is something new. So going outside and getting ideas from something new, like I exist in spaces in music and fashion and art and all of these things that give me such great inspiration. So don't look to other brands. I would say is definitely my number one recommendation.
That's a really hard one because I think it speaks to risk. And I think that, you know, advertising is at its best an expression of confidence. And I think what you're saying, like, as brands become risk adverse, like you lose the confidence. And when you lose the confidence, you lose that swagger. And the, you know, that is what I think people are drawn to is like if you're putting out a message and you're like, hey, I think I can put this 30-second video out there and get you interested in my product enough to buy it. And I think that like I can spend $10,000 on this 30-second thing and that it'll be worth it. I think a crisis of like confidence is what's infected so many marketers and brands.
100%.
And they're just like, you know, then hedging. They're hedging themselves into like oblivion, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And then my last piece of advice would be to, if you're not too afraid to post your work, I think like a lot of what you spend your time on is really valuable to share with others. Like something that I was talking about in that like Rachel Carton interview is a lot of marketers will ask me like how I've gotten a lot of the cool opportunities I have. And it's because I'm sharing the work that I'm doing. So whether you're doing that like on social or on LinkedIn or building a portfolio, like those are all really meaningful expressions of your perspective that have value.
Yeah.
Like you have value, you know?
Yeah. It's such like simple but difficult advice because I think everyone feels like, you know, the thing I did isn't big enough. It's not cool enough. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't this viral sensation. And so like, I'm not going to talk about it.
No. Oh my gosh. I feel like there's such an amazing movement, especially with TikTok and kind of what I was saying, like democratization of like creators and working is people are now going to TikTok and like Instagram to find people to work for them. You know, I just saw this like amazing TikTok video of a fashion brand. I'm forgetting the name, looking for makeup artist for their show because they can't afford to have a makeup sponsor because of the rates. And they were just asking for makeup artists on TikTok to submit their work so that they can hire them and have a whole based community-based TikTok makeup artist hired show.
That's great.
Like that is amazing. I come from like Lincoln Center, New York Fashion Week, Maybelline sponsored era where it was closed doors. Like that is such a window that has been opened as a result of social that like it feels like the risk, like the reward is so much higher than the risk now that there's like no reason to be afraid of the risk, you know?
Yeah. I love it. I love that. Last question. Who is your favorite follow right now?
My favorite follow?
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a good question. That's such a good question. I mean, we all know it's a brat summer. So obviously Charli XCX is incredible.
Also, I love that she's been doing the carousels from TikTok and stuff.
She's
and, like,
amazing.
It's such a like celebration of community.
She's
you know?
amazing.
And it's a nice mix of like famous friends doing, you know, and just like us normies.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. She's amazing. And it's been very interesting to watch because you'll see Kamala HQ, her TikTok kind of following the same exact social cues. So that's been fun to watch. I guess like a guilty pleasure of mine might be Nara Smith. Watching her make anything is I'm sitting there and I'm watching it.
Yeah.
She's like, how to make bread from scratch, how to make a computer from scratch. It's amazing. And watching brands have an appetite to kind of build from that
The
has
Marc Jacobs
been.
thing was great.
Marc Jacobs was amazing. Aritzia just did something with
that
her.
was really good.
So yeah, I'm really enjoying. It feels like we're in a really also interesting time as brands where you have to have the flexibility to adapt to these trends
and stuff. Yeah.
Like you have to be like, the budget has to break for Q4 because we have this person right now that we need to act on.
Yeah.
And I think Nara Smith is like a really nice example of that.
Absolutely. I just did my first like voiceover reel
Really?
the other day just for fun. And I sent it to my wife. I was like, is this any good? And she was like, you sound like a trad wife. Like, and then I was listening to it. I was like, oh my God, I did totally use a trad wife voice.
That's so funny.
You know, that like kind of just like soft, like monotone.
That's so funny.
Thing. It's like funny how these things like you like listen to it enough and it like and
then it conditions you,
rotting your brain.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm gonna just do this.
That's
now I'm a trad wife.
Funny. That's so funny.
So that's my future.
That's so funny.
We may cut this into the like earlier, but I do want to just like touch briefly on what you think the role of trends should be in anyone's social strategy, be that a brand or an influencer. I can tell you our clients are obsessed with understanding how they can, you know, join trends more effectively. I know creators are feeling pressure to jump on all of these things. Like, how important do you think they are? How much of your strategy should it be?
Yeah, I think it just depends, like, again, on what your perspective is as a person or a brand. Like, for instance, e.l.f. has this really amazing approach to creating products based off of trends, but that's who they are as a brand. Whereas, like, I probably wouldn't say the same for, like, an artistry brand like Charlotte Tilbury, because she kind of is creating things on her own, out of her own experience. So I think it depends, but I've seen brands take like really fun approaches. Like Marc Jacobs, their TikTok account is incredible. Instead of just like creating a TikTok account where like you have one person doing all of the trends, they are just like hiring the talent that is culturally relevant to the space and letting them do their own thing. So I think just like, you know, letting the creators be themselves from a brand perspective feels like the answer. Set Active also did something really cool where they hired a creator to kind of create all of their TikTok account content, and it was amazing. So yeah, getting creators to let them be themselves for the brand feels like that's the answer. And then for a creator, I think it's super interesting. I kind of think, you know, when you think about someone like Nara Smith, like she has done the same repeated action every single day since she's been on the platform, and it's grown. It's very similar to like if we're even thinking about Charli, like she has had her music stuck with it and it grew. So I think if you have a niche and you feel really passionate about it, sticking with it, and the trends will just come and follow suit. But if you're a creator that has perspective on like, let's say like fashion, and you like to do try on hauls every day, like does it hurt to use like a trending sound? No. Like, does it hurt to give your perspective on something that's growing? No, as long as you have like a defined perspective. I think if you're like a creator that's just following trends as a means of creating content, then that's where you kind of get lost, because you know, everyone can do that. So what is your added value to them feels like the answer for the creator.
And I think once you define that clearly, be it a brand or a creator, what am I trying to say? I do think it becomes very natural to be like, oh, this trend is perfect.
Exactly.
And probably more importantly, this one doesn't make any sense for me, and I'm not going to participate. I can, and I think it's important for both creators and brands to know, like, it's okay to have fun consuming content for a trend and not create in it, right?
Exactly.
Like, I've been putting, again, stuff on the internet since 2008, and I love memes. I've never made one, you know? It's just like not what I, it's
exactly.
okay. It's okay to like enjoy consuming something and not have to create it.
Yeah. It's like exactly like what I was saying earlier, where it's like a brand reaches out to me to do something that feels inauthentic to me. Me saying no is equally as great of an answer, because you're just protecting the space that you're existing in online.
Absolutely.
The same goes for a brand or a person.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, thank you so much. This was
you.
incredible.
This has been so fun.
Where can everyone find you?
On Instagram, I'm just Tyra Booker, my full name, and then at Ilia Beauty.
And influencers, get your organic Ilia Beauty posts up. Take the link to those posts, then send it. Do not send her shit if you have not posted about the brand.
Yeah, try the product.
Try the product. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was great. Perfect. Okay.